Okay, so today I've got Michael O'Brien with me. For people that don't know, Michael was wrongly convicted of the murder of Cardiff newsagent Philip Saunders, which occurred in 1987. Michael was convicted in 1988. Eventually, on Friday, the 17th of December 1999, the Court of Appeal quashed his conviction, along with the other two people that were convicted. And Michael has since done a lot of things, been very much involved in challenging the authorities with regard to his conviction. He's become an author, he's been on television numerous times, and I'm really privileged to have him. So, first of all, let's say hello to Michael.
Hi.
So, we're going to discuss today all of the background to what occurred in Michael's case and everything that he's learned from that experience and everything he's been through. And we're also going to discuss Lucy's case a bit as well. I just want to say before we begin that some of the things that Michael is going to discuss are distressing. He's obviously discussed it numerous times. He's used to talking about it, and I've heard the story before. But I just want people to be aware that we're not going to pull any punches. We're just going to tell you the unvarnished truth of what happened. So, with that being said, Michael, let's take you back to when this all began. So, you were how old at the time?
I was 19 years of age in 1987 when this happened to me. Um, Philip Saunders was a local newsagent. He was a well-known public figure, local figure, who was robbed of his shop's take-ins and beaten about the head and died 5 days later from his injuries. This is what we were wrongly accused of.
Right, okay. Um, so can you tell me the circumstances that occurred? How was it that you came to be wrongly accused of this horrible act?
Well, I'm going to be honest with everybody, as I always am. We were out on the night in question trying to steal cars and be one of the boys. I was trying to fit in and be one of the lads. Joyriding is commonly known now. Um, and we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were out on the night in question when Philip Saunders was brutally attacked. Um, the evidence against us, which was used against us, was quite shocking. I want to stress that before I went into prison, I believed in the police, I believed in the system. You know what I mean? I didn't think innocent people went to prison. I want to stress that now. And basically, my co-accused, Darren Hall, who's got a personality disorder, um, on the night in question, because we were out stealing cars, the police were doing like a dragnet. Anyone with a criminal record, they were pulling in, which was Ellis Sherwood, Darren Hall, my other co-accused. I didn't have a criminal record at all. I'd never been into trouble in my life before. And they their names come up in the list of people who were known people to the police, and they were pulled in. And Darren Hall, after giving 8 different confessions in the police station, settled on one which implicated me, Ellis, and Darren. Um, Now, we were pulled in on the 1st of November 1987. I was absolutely horrified. Horrified. There's one thing going out to steal a car, but to murder somebody, that was never discussed. That was never our agenda. So, where Darren Hall got this from, I just have, it was a complete shock. It was a complete shock to my system when they come smashing down the door and arresting us for the murder. So we were then taken to Canton Police Station where I was held for 3 days. And then they released us pending further investigations. Even though Darren Hall confessed and implicated us, um, they had very little. They had nothing other than that, only his testimony. So what they did then, the police went on a crusade, if you like, to gather further evidence. And what they did, they used associates of Ellis Sherwood, Christopher Chick and Helen Morris, who were in serious trouble with the police, by the way, um, for their own criminalities, especially Christopher Chick, not so much his girlfriend, but Christopher Chick himself. And he turned around and said that he's seen us spending money in town bragging about killing Philip Saunders. So that was another piece of evidence they got, and that's what got us rearrested on the 10th of November, and that was the second arrest. And whilst we were in police custody, according to an ex-police officer at the time, well, he was a serving police officer at the time, Inspector Stuart Lewis, he alleges that he overheard a conversation outside the cells between me and Ellis Sherwood confessing to the murder. Which was untrue, of course, but nevertheless, it was still a piece of evidence which was used against us. Then, when we were on remand, a couple of remand prisoners admitted that Ellis Sherwood had, come forward and said that Ellis Sherwood had confessed to him. Well, there was all sorts of flaws with all that evidence. There was no forensic evidence linking any of us to the crime, none whatsoever. Unbeknown to us at the time, Darren Hall had confessed to things he hadn't done before. We didn't know that at the trial. I did not know as well that Stuart Lewis had a habit of making up confessions outside the cells in other people's cases, which was going to later play a big part in the appeal. So the evidence there consisted of 5 prosecution witnesses, including the police officer, and that was basically it. There was no forensic evidence, no eyewitnesses. In fact, we had an alibi for the actual time of the murder. Her name was Sylvia Yates. We were 3 miles away from where the murder happened at 11:30. The murder took place about 11:21. So we were at a run 3 miles in 9 minutes. Now, even Roger Bannister couldn't do that. So that gives you an idea. And it was raining. It was heavily raining on the night in question. So, we'd have to be Linford Christie to, speeds to sort of get to A to B. It just couldn't, it was impossible. But nevertheless, we were sent for trial. I was put on remand in Cardiff prison. I was tearful. I was upset. I was angry. I was married at the time. I had 1 child and I had 1 on the way. My daughter was born when I was in Cardiff prison, and that was the only bit of joy I had. But that was even to be short-lived. For the simple fact was, 3 months later, the priest come and told me that I got a special visit, and I thought, oh, maybe my solicitor's got some new evidence or something. I really thought something good was going to happen. It was then that they told me that my daughter had died of a cot death. So I had to deal with my daughter dying I was 19 years of age, dealing with a wrongful imprisonment, dealing with my daughter dying, and then my wife left me a couple of weeks later because she couldn't cope with it. She was only 18. And that's where we were at that stage, and we waited for trial.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that must have been incredibly hard, hard at any age, but obviously you were quite young. So I just wanted to take you back to the initial arrest. How did that manifest? I mean, were you at home? Was it knock on the door?
Down my sister-in-law's house, and the door come crashing in. Somebody knocked the door, and we went to open it, and the next one you know, the door came flying off the hinges. And they come up to me and said, "Are you Michael O'Brien?" I said, "Yes." They said, "We're arresting you for the murder of Philip Saunders." And the first words which come out of my mouth was, "Who the effing hell is Philip Saunders?" Never heard of the guy, which I didn't. I didn't know the guy at all. And they said, "Are you Ellis Sherwood?" I'd never seen so many police in all my life. They frog marched us out of the house, took us to Canton Police Station. And while we were in the police station, we were treated quite badly. I was handcuffed to hot radiators, left for long periods of time. They were interviewing me off the record without my solicitor present and stuff like that. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. It was like something out of a movie you see in the movies, not something you expect to happen in real life. But that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So I know you've mentioned that police were pretty heavy-handed with you, um, and you also said I went into this with a positive view of the police, feeling that people are not wrongly convicted. So when you were being questioned and when they were speaking with you, did you just think, well, if I just tell the truth, this will blow over?
Well, yeah, I did. I lied in my initial statement because we stole a car on a night in question about
Hmm.
1 morning, something like that. It was about 1:30. I can't remember the exact time, Chris. It's a long time ago. But
Yeah.
on the night in question, and I was more concerned about what we had done. You know. Now the two boys who I was with, Ellis Sherwood and Darren Hall, I called for a friend of mine that night as well, Richard Yates. His mother was our alibi. And what actually happened then is, we were so wet. It was a bad night. It was bad weather. I was soaked through to the skin. I just wanted to go home. So we took the car. We stole the car. All my friends did. I mean, I couldn't drive, but I was there when the car was stolen, and I feel just as guilty as what he is in the eyes of the law. And I was more concerned about in the police station covering up for what we had done, you know. So I didn't know about no murder. So, but after 6 pages in my statement, I realised I need to tell the truth here. I need to tell him exactly what we were up to. And I did tell him. And after 6 pages of my statement, I said, listen, if you want to know what we were doing, we were out joyriding that night. You know what I mean? And my brother in law already told him anyway, and so did Darren Hall. But Darren Hall already left us. So, that's what we initially went out for. But we left Darren Hall earlier on in the evening. But going back to that day, I'll never forget it, Chris. It was just something unreal. Uh, I understand how other miscarriages of justice victims feel when watch the TV and I see cases like, some of the cases I'm working on now, including Lucy's, I mean, I understand what they've gone through, and it's terrifying.
So when you see Lucy, it's saying that you must obviously we know the police haven't released that much footage, but we've seen a very small period of her being interviewed. So obviously I look at that, my immediate interpretation is she's terrified of what's happening. How do you feel when you look at that?
Well, I've seen the same footage, and it's clear she's like a scared rabbit. That's what I was like.
Mm.
You just in shock. You just numb. You just don't know what. It's such a surreal situation to be in. You know you're innocent, but nobody's listening. They're not interested about your innocence. All they want you to do is tell them that you did it, and don't tell them you did it. That's when the problems start.
Yeah. So you've been arrested and you've been through this horrible period, and then eventually you're charged for these murders. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you felt at that time?
I can remember at 11 o'clock on November the 10th, they come to me and they said, we're going to charge you with murder. And I was crying. And my sister was there, and I said, this can't be right. What do they mean they're charging me with murder? We haven't done anything. But when you look at review the evidence, my sister said they had a prima facie case on paper. I didn't understand that legal jargon. I wasn't clued up on legal stuff at the time. But we were charged, and then we was taken to I was taken to Cardiff prison, and that was unreal as well. I've never been in prison in my life before. I've never even seen an inside of a prison. It was one of the most horrendous things which have ever happened in my life. To be thrown in a cell and the door shut, knowing that I hadn't done anything, and that was one of the worst feelings ever. So again, I can relate to many other victims of miscarriages of justice who've had their name cleared. I can put myself in Lucy Letby's position when that door shut, how she actually felt. She must have been terrified, because I know I was.
Yeah, I think anyone would be really. So you're there in prison and you're waiting for your court date, um, and then eventually you're called into the court. Did you have faith in the court process going into it?
I always had this little bit of, they don't convict innocent people. I was still naive. I was still trying to hold on that the system don't do these things. But when we went for trial, and I had to listen to these people lie in the witness box about me, including a senior police officer, I knew we were in trouble, but I didn't realise how bad it was going to be. You know, I still tried to keep hold of that little bit of faith to think they've got to see the truth. You know, you're like, they've got to. I didn't do it, so they must see it. I was so blinkered. I was so blinkered. And my nightmare was just about beginning. Because I remember our trial started on June the 27th, 1988, and we were convicted on July the 20th. And I remember the horrifying words the judge said to me. He said to me, "You have been found guilty, rightly so in my view. You've had the opportunity through your lawyers and yourself to put your case before the courts, and you have been found guilty. There's only one sentence I can give you. That is one of life, and 8 years for the robbery. Take him down." I was just so numb, Chris. I can't explain the feeling and the horror. My legs nearly buckled underneath me. I had to hold onto the railings, and I said to my father, I turned around to him and said, "Dad, as long as you know I never done it." Tears streamed on my face. That's all. That's all which matters. And I looked at the jury and I mouthed to him, "You've got it wrong. You've got it so wrong." And that's when I was taken down to begin my life sentence, and I was taken back to Cardiff to await to be sentenced to a life of prison. You know, a top security prison, which is where I went in the end.
Yeah. So obviously you're in this. I mean, it's hard to imagine. Obviously, I think it would be insulting for anyone that hasn't been in that situation to say that we can imagine what it was like. I don't think we can. Um, but you're in this horrible situation. Are you traveling in a prison vehicle, presumably, and then you arrive at the prison? I mean, what is it like when, the door shuts behind you and you realize that you're in prison and that's it?
All I kept on doing is crying. I didn't. I was just. I was a mess. I was having a nervous breakdown. I didn't realise it. There was an incident I can remember on the 30th of November, 1987, when I was in Cardiff prison on remand, where I was having a nervous breakdown, and the screws were telling me, "O'Brien, get yourself together. What's the matter with you?" I couldn't get the words out, Chris, but I was saying, if I could get the effing word, if I could get my effing self together, don't you think I would? But I couldn't get the words out. And they had to carry me into the medical room because my arms seized up, my whole body seized up, and I was just having a nervous breakdown. It was as simple as that. I was close to having a full-on breakdown. And I'll never forget the 30th of November, because that was one of the days where it all happened, where I nearly collapsed and was in pieces. And I don't think people realise what miscarriages of justice victims go through at all. I mean, you see some stuff in movies and you see stuff like the Guildford Four, in the name of the father. But when you're that person going through this journey, it's a battle every day to get out of bed. It's a battle every minute of the day, because you've got to watch over your shoulders because of the people you're in with. I mean, some of the people I was in with were some of the most notorious prisoners in this country. I wasn't in with a little car thief. I wasn't in with a little burglar. I was in with triple murderers, bombers, rapists, child kid, little, genuine child killers and everything. And you had to watch yourself because the violence in these prisons is unreal.
Yeah.
It, it's. I'll give you an example. In Long Lartin, I was there for 7 years, and there were 7 people murdered. I seen some of these people killed, and you got to watch yourself when you're in prison because you're always fearful of attack, especially when you're innocent. You're always fearful. Well, what happens if people think that I'm guilty? What happens if somebody turns on you? And you've got to be so careful. And I was lucky for me because there was a number. I say unlucky, um, unlucky for some because there were some other innocent people in prison as well, the Birmingham Six, and some people like that who I met, the Carl Bridgewater. I George Long, who was fighting his case, and many others, Michael Shirley. They all had their name clearance now, and we found each other. You know what I mean? And we stuck together as a little group, sort of thing. So we had a little unit. So and we just stuck with the ones who were fighting their cases and stuff like that. And this is what I did. And I was a mess when I went to Long Martin. I started taking illicit alcohol, drugs. I didn't care, Chris, if I lived or died at that stage when I first went to Long Martin in Evesham. I was 21 years of age by the time the trial came, 20, 21. I was in a hell of a state. Mentally, physically, I had no fight in me. I don't know how I was going to fight this miscarriage. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just know at that stage I couldn't care if I lived or died. And then I had a breakthrough.
And what was that? What was the breakthrough that occurred?
I was in my cell one day where I'd been on a binge of drinking drugs, and I went to work in the morning about 9 o'clock, and I come back at 12. We bang up for dinner at 1 o'clock, and then I thought it was 2 o'clock that I'd woken up, so I thought I'd only been asleep for an hour. Well, I'd been asleep for 7 hours, and I didn't know, and I thought I'm going back after dinner, so I goes downstairs, gets ready for work in the afternoon, or so I thought it was the afternoon, and I said to the officers, "Can you let me off the wing? I got to go to work." And they started laughing at me. And I thought, "What are you laughing at me for?" You know what I mean? I'm not in the mood, boss. I said, "Just open the frigging door, I got to go to work. I got things to do." And they said, "Listen, you want to go and have a look at the time?" So I thought, okay, I'll go and have a look at the time. It was 8:10 in the night, Chris. I'd been asleep since 1 o'clock. It dawned on me that I had a drug problem. And I went up, sat on my bed, and I cried my eyes out. And I thought, oh my God, what is happening to me? What has happened to me? How could I lose 8 hours, 7 hours, and not realize that I don't, that I've been asleep that long? I thought it was only an hour. And it was because I was drug induced. And then I realized I needed to get help. And what I did then next day, I bumped into some of the Birmingham Six. I bumped into some of the Carl Bridgewater. And do you know what they said to me? You got to start writing to journalists. You got to start doing this. Otherwise, no use you going down the road you're going, smashing up your cell and doing this and that. You got to, And I said, well, I can't read or write. And one of them said to me, well, maybe it's about time you bloody learned then, isn't it? And I'm like, whoa. I had a roasting off them. Do you know what I mean? No sympathy, just a roasting. And then I decided I'm going to go and see the psychiatrist and psychologist. So I went down to see him. I met this woman called Fiona. I told her what was wrong with me. I told her the issues, that I was wrongly convicted and I had a drug problem and everything. They put a plan in place. I got off the drugs. I got off most of the drugs, all the hard drugs anyway. And I got off the booze. Then I started getting angry, Chris. I started getting really angry at my situation because I could see reality. And I thought, you know something, I got to learn to read and write. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try. So I enlisted to go on education classes, which is what I did. Well, I passed 3 English exams, level 1, 2, and 3 RSA, got 90% in all 3 of them in the end, and learned to read and write. I also took on 3 maths exams, which I got level 1, 2, and 3 RSA in that, I went further and got a City and Guilds Word Power Level 1 in prison as well. And in the meantime, I started studying law. I went down and started studying law, and I was having a problem with the prison authorities about access to journalists. And my legal skills got me to the stage where I took the governor of Long Lartin to court and the Home Secretary, Michael Howard, and used my right to free speech to allow journalists to come and visit me. And I made legal history with that case. I took it to the High Court. They said Mr. O'Brien was right, he can have journalists. Then there was a change of government. The Labour government came in, there was the Conservatives at the time, and Jack Straw won it back, where I was banned from journalists again. So I decided to take it one step further and took it to the House of Lords. And the House of Lords ruled in my favour. 5 law lords said I was in the right. And I made legal history for all innocent prisoners. Any innocent prisoner who was saying they're innocent is legally entitled in law, because of the O'Brien judgment, Simpson O'Brien, to have journalists to go and sit on a visit with them and discuss their case and report on their case.
Okay.
And so I started really coming into my own, and the anger was carried me through, to be honest with you. The anger of being wrongly convicted, and I had to do something, Chris. And the only person who was going to do it was me. Nobody was going to help me.
Absolutely. So how, at a certain point, your case begins to come into the public eye. How did you feel at that point? Did you feel encouraged by that? Did you think, okay, this is positive, or what was your frame of mind at that time?
Well, I was delighted when it started getting the publicity. And I'll tell you that first publicity we really got significant. In 1992, John Major was in at the time, the Prime Minister, and we went on hunger strike in the prison. And it hit all Radio 4. It started hitting the news that we were refusing our Christmas meals because we were saying we were innocent and wanted our cases reviewed. It's the first time prisoners have ever got together. 20 prisoners in Gartrey on hunger strike, 15 in Long Lartin, 10 in Cardiff, 15 in Swansea. And it hit all around the country. People who were saying they were innocent when refused their Christmas meals. And I walked into the TV room seeing my mother and my father being interviewed on ITV. So I couldn't believe it. I was quite.
That must have been really, moving, I guess, at the time.
It was seeing the press outside my own house. You know what I mean? My mum's and dad's house, and they're being interviewed. And my mother saying, "Well, Michael's on the 3-day fast because of the wrongful conviction," and it brought it to the attention of the media. I had numerous programs made when I was in prison. Law in Action, Marcel Berlin's Radio 4,
Right.
Sybil Ruscoe on Radio 5 Live done pieces. Then Chris Mullins, the famous MP who helped to get the Birmingham Six out, was involved. Then I had Harry Fletcher, the National Association of Probation Officers, involved. Liberty in London and Liberty in South Wales, they all supported our cause. And the next minute, the Sunday Express are writing articles about us, the Daily Mirror, the Observer, and it just come from nowhere, Chris. Do you know what I mean? And I just thought, all this long slog of fighting and writing to journalists and everything. I used to write 70 letters a week, Chris. 70 letters a week I used to write. I didn't mess about. I wrote to every single MP. I wrote to members of the House of Commons, members of the House of Lords. I never stopped. Once I got going and I got them certificates and I started learning to read and write, that was it. There was no stopping me. I was like a juggernaut, just go, right, I'm on a mission. I got to do this,
Yeah.
And the thing is, I had to do it because my other 2 co-accused were not in a position to. My one co-accused, Ellis Sherwood, was a heroin addict. Darren Hall has got a mind of a child. He couldn't fight himself. So I had to take the role for the 3 of us, which
Yeah,
is what I do, and so did my family.
absolutely. So we're going to talk about your exoneration in a bit. But first, I get quite a few questions about life in prison. Now, I appreciate this is a male prison compared to a female prison, and it was some years ago now. But I just wanted to ask a little bit about that because it may be illustrative to some extent. So, how do you come to terms with being in prison, and did you receive protection? How were you treated by other people as well?
Well, I was lucky because I studied law. I started studying prison law. I used to help the prisoners inside the prison, so I got on with most people. I got into a few scrapes. Don't get me wrong. You're not everybody's cup of tea, like you know what I mean, sort of thing. And you're gonna fall out with certain people. I've had a few fights, and whatever when I was inside. Um, but I think the best way I got on is because I studied law and I knew the prison system and the rules. I became the prison lawyer because I used to help people with adjudications when they were put on charges by the prison officers. I would have a look at those charges to see whether there was any legal framework which could say that that was unlawful or what they did was wrong. And I won 9 out of 10 cases against the governor when I took on other people's cases. I caused mayhem over the mandatory drugs testing. I don't know whether you can remember when they brought that in 92, 93. They had to call a scientist because it was hearsay evidence. And they got in their barristers, the solicitors at the Home Office, because I was causing them so much trouble with my legal skills. I did chuckle to myself at times because I thought, here's somebody who didn't have no knowledge of law but is now doing good. So that's how I got by in prison, by helping other prisoners, not just on the miscarriage of justices, but on the system as a whole, and how to navigate it. So the other thing is as well, I got some structure. I used to go down to the gym a lot, and I used to have structure in the mornings. I used to get up, go to the gym, have breakfast, go to work, do whatever I had to do, come back, work on my case, and I had it all structured out like you do on the outside. You know what I mean? Like you got your working thing outside, you've got yourself inside, and you've got to do that to sort of get things done. And writing 70 letters a week, which is near enough 10 letters a night, and that's not without the letters I wrote to my family and my campaigners as well. That was just for the campaign. The 70 letters was for the MPs and everything, and the journalists. And I got to be honest with you, the big breakthrough for us before we got exonerated, a few years later, was in '96. The week in, week out team, which is like the equivalent of the is called the Welsh Panorama down in Wales. They did an investigation into our case, Chris, and all the prosecution witnesses went on TV and admitted they had lied and that they had been coerced by the police. Then we found out about this police officer who had made up confessions in numerous other cases. Sharon Kelleher case, Anthony Yellen. I mean, there was loads of other cases. And the jury called him a liar. They acquitted all the defendants because they said that confession could not have been true. So if the jury would have known all this, it would have been a different picture. But we didn't find out until the week in, week out team did an investigation, and they played a significant part in our appeal. The other crucial bits of evidence which helped us was Darren Hall went on national television. They allowed him to be interviewed in Grendon Prison, which I was quite surprised that they allowed it when they were banning me from speaking to him at the time. And he admitted that what he had said was untrue and that none of us had done the murder. I was so shocked when I seen that for the first time because I knew he hadn't done it. He couldn't have done it, Chris. He was with us at the time. I just needed him to say it, and he did. So we got 2 psychological reports done on him, and one of them is a guy who I want to talk about a bit later on because he's involved in Lucy's case, Gisley Good Johnson.
Okay.
The leading expert on confessions. He's an ex-Iceland police officer. He's an ex-police officer from Iceland, and he's the leading expert in the world on confessions, and he proved that Darren Hall's confession was false and give reasons to why Darren Hall said what he did. There was also another expert called Olive Turnstall who's an expert on psychology, and she give explanations as to why Darren Hall was like a Walter Mitty character, as the Court of Appeal put it. I think that's the best way I could describe it. You know, he's got more personalities than Rory Bremner, I think, something like that, as somebody once said. So, you know, that gives you the person, you know, people who are watching this, an idea what Darren Hall was like. It wasn't his fault. You know what I mean? It wasn't his fault at all, but the police preyed on him like they did in other miscarriages in Wales. There's the other cases where they've, in Wales, Cardiff Five, the Darrell brothers, they all got that common thread with mine. They picked on the vulnerable one, got him to confess, and then built the case around that confession, you know, which used to be, that was the thing in the 80s in Wales, which is a part of my campaign I'm trying to sort out now. But that's what happened. That's when we got all the evidence together. But then the CCRC, as it's now known, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, was set up in '97. They took over our case from the Home Office, and all the BBC stuff went to them. They investigated, called in an outside police force, the Thames Valley Police, and the Thames Valley Police is probably one of the most damning reports into any police force in the country. That's how bad it was. I'll give you an example of some of the things they found. 115 breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. 115. Denial of access to lawyers, unlawful. R versus Samuels, 1988. Give you some ideas. There was just so much they found, and everything I said what the police done to me, they confirmed that it did happen. So I knew we were going home soon, but I didn't know when. And our case was referred back to the Court of Appeal on the 29th of October, 1998. And when I seen that Thames Valley Police report, I begged my lawyer to go for bail. And that's what I did. And that's what I got up to. I was in Gartree Prison then, by the way, and having a hard time, because what I found, the more publicity I was getting for the case as well, the more the prison authorities didn't like it. And I was having problems with visits and legal visits, and, you know, some of my mail was going missing, money was being taken out of my account, you know what I mean, out of my letters, this. And I was, you know, and yeah, and they used to intimidate me when I was on the phone to my lawyers, because they didn't like me telling them about John who got beaten up down the seg, you know what I mean, and things like that, because I was very vocal, you know. So that's when the CCRC come in. But if it wasn't for the BBC in Wales doing that investigation, we would have struggled. They've done a really good and thorough investigation, and I gotta thank. There's many people to thank for all that. You know, in Wales, I gotta be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame that BBC don't do that now. But let's talk about your actual exoneration. So it still took over a year from the case being referred to the Court of Appeal for you to be exonerated. So how did you first hear about that, and what was the process, and how did you feel?
Well, when that case got first referred back to the Court of Appeal, when we had a bail hearing on the 21st of December 1988, and I was sitting on my bunk, and Phil Parry from the BBC Week In Week Out team come on and said we were being released the next day. Well, I nearly choked on my cigarette because I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that we were going to be released in the morning. And that's when I first heard on Radio 5 Live that we were the next day. So you can imagine all the other prisoners heard it, banging their doors with their pots and pans. Mickey O'Brien's going home tomorrow. Way. I mean, the euphoria was just unbelievable. And the feeling of, this is what I fought for. You know what I mean? I know it wasn't the full appeal, but I was going home for Christmas. And that was just an amazing, amazing release day. They made me wait, mind, the police did, till 4 o'clock on the 22nd. They're messing around with the paperwork, and they didn't sign this and didn't sign that. And, you know, they were delaying tactics, you know, just to have a last parting shot. And there was a funny incident a few weeks before I got out. And I think you might find it amusing because I did. They were giving out tellies in Gartree prison at the time to prisoners who behaved themselves. And there was this prison officer I didn't get on with, and he said to me, "You're not getting a telly, O'Brien." And I said, "Well, listen, you can shove your telly where the sun don't shine because when I get my name cleared and when I get out on bail, I'll go buy my own tellies." I was a bit more, the language was a bit more colourful than that. I'm just toning it
Yeah.
down here. Okay. And who was the last person I seen on the way out when they were releasing me? Was this prison officer. I said, I told you I can buy my own effing tellies now, can't I? I said, cheers, and just walked out. No, you couldn't have wrote the script for it. And he put his head down, So it's like little victories like that mean a lot to prisoners. You know what I mean? Little, it might seem petty to the average Joe Blogs. But when you're in prison, it's a battle of wits with the prison officers sometimes as well, and if you can get one up on them, like, and things like that, or a victory of some sort. And that's what it was. And then I got released then. Um, that was amazing. I got taken out of Gartree prison. Now, most ex-prisoners will remember these things. We got volumetric control boxes where we have our possessions in. We're only allowed to have so many possessions. And they put the boxes on the side of the prison, and I was let out of the prison. And the first thing I noticed, I never seen so many cars in my life before, Chris. And I heard a horn beep, and I jumped out of my skin because I haven't heard that noise for 12 years. And it frightened me. And then I looked over to my right. There was media everywhere. And I see my family and my son come running over to me, and I put him in my arms, and it was like, it was an amazing feeling to be released after all these years. I know I had to wait to the appeal, but I was home for Christmas with my family, where I actually belonged, and that's the most important thing at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it must have been overwhelming. At
It
the,
was, it was for my mother as well, because I can recall when I come home, I only went up to the garage to get a packet of fags because I learned to smoke when I was in prison. I never used to smoke at all when before. And I ran out of cigarettes. So I went up to the garage and I went to get a newspaper. I come back. My mother was in tears. She said, "I thought you weren't coming back." I remember when you went to the shop. So I realised my family were traumatised by what had gone on as well. And I didn't realise how bad it affected them, because families get affected by the wrongful conviction. The weight the mum and dad carries, like in with Lucy's case, I really feel for Lucy's parents because what my parents went through, I witnessed it. I seen it when I come out, even years later, the traumatic effect it has on them. So, my heart does go out to them, like it really does.
yeah, me too. So obviously, your first battle is you're wrongly convicted, you're in prison, you shouldn't be there, and then you manage to get out. We should emphasize at this point that you spent what are often described as the best years of your life in prison. I mean, they took away the point of your life where you're at physical peak, and then you came out. What were you, 31, 32? Is that correct?
32 when I come out,
Yeah.
yes. I come out when I was 32, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first battle. You've won the first battle, and then you're on the outside and you have to adapt. So what was that like?
I think after the euphoria died down, um, I started suffering a lot of depression, and I was getting a lot of flashbacks to prison. I didn't realize at the time I had post-traumatic stress disorder until I seen a doctor years later. But one thing I want to say, I was thrown out of prison with £44 in my pocket and told to get on with my life as if nothing had happened. I had no help, no doctors, no psychiatrist. I never seen anybody. I was just basically shoved out there and told to get on with my life. I didn't know what to do, Chris. I didn't know how to cope. And bearing in mind, my son, who was one when I went into prison, was now nearly 13. I didn't know how to be a dad. You know, I love my son to bits. Don't get me wrong. He's very precious to me. But all the skills I would have learned being a parent, being a dad, growing up, going to work, putting food on the table, doing things which a lot of people take for granted, I think, you know, um, really messed me up, really messed me up. And I found it really difficult to adjust. I found that anger was very, very prominent. If I seen the police car or something like that, I was like growling and, you know, and I wanted justice. I still hadn't had justice, and I went on the crusade when I come out. I wanted the police to be brought to book for what they'd done to me. Not only the police, the solicitors, the barristers, all the people who caused my wrongful conviction, and the witnesses who lied about us, should have all gone to prison. So I launched in a big campaign, and when I seen all the other miscarriages in Wales, I joined up with other forces with other miscarriages. And at Hewins, the Merthyr Three, that might be a case you're not familiar with. Jonathan Jones is another case. The Cardiff Five. We all joined forces, and we called for a judicial inquiry into all the cases, which is what one of my books is based on. Because in Wales, there's been 15 miscarriages of justice in a short period of time. There's been 11 proven, 4 still outstanding, and there's more since I've been investigating. That I found a couple more besides in the early 2016, 2020. I found another one, and things are still going on. And I just felt like when I first come out, something's got to change. We've got to bring about change, and that's one thing I've been fighting for many, many years. And the only case I know in Wales where they've caught the real killer is in the Cardiff Five case, in the Lynette White murder case. They actually found the real killer, which is brilliant. But if it wasn't for my case, this new unit, which was set up to look at these cases, would never have been born. It was my case which broke the camel's back, if you like, because mine was the last case after all the other ones. So, I think it put the icing on the cake. So I'm pleased about some of the work I've done has brought about some change, but there's still a long way to go.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about your work a little bit later, but I want to ask you about the long-term consequences of what you've been through. Obviously, a very traumatic experience. So, what are the long-term kind of psychological, mental, even physical consequences?
Well, anyone who suffers a wrongful convictions will have a um, deep illness of post-traumatic stress disorder. It hits us all. I still suffer it today. I've been out 27 years nearly. I'm still seeing a psychiatrist. I've only just managed now, after 26 years, get on a program called the EMDR treatment, which is for what the soldiers have, and they can only do a certain amount on that. But I have to fight for that, and it's taken me 26 years to get that help. I suffer every day, make no mistake about it, Chris. I look normal, I can talk normal, I can function, but when the depression hits, it's really bad. When I sleep, go to sleep in the night, I have flashbacks of these prisoners being murdered, flashbacks to my daughter's funeral, and things like that, the wrongful conviction. I've left prison, but prison never leaves me. And that's the thing. It doesn't never leave you. The only way you can survive is you have to learn to live with it, accept it for what it is, embrace what's going on, and try and live day to day. And that's the only way you can recover. Unfortunately, there's a lot of miscarriages of justices, not just in Wales, who haven't made it. Kevin passed away. The Merthyr girls, one of the Merthyr girls, Annette Hewins, passed away. The Darvell brothers are dead. 3 in the Cardiff Five are dead. Not many of them make it because they're so badly damaged. One of the few in Wales who've managed to keep it together. But it's difficult. And anyone who comes out after serving a long period of time for something they haven't done will always have those effects. It's just how you manage to adjust to them, and manage your illness the best you can, because that's all you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you think having, I mean, we're going to say we're going to discuss this, but you've become a campaigner, you've become a writer. So, do you think having a real purpose helps with dealing with that?
It does, because the anger still drives me on. The sense of injustice. I have had no accountability in my case, and neither have all the other cases in Wales. And it really makes me so mad that you look at all the police officers, not one police officers in Wales. I want to give you some statistics on police officers, which is very useful for you to know. Since the Guildford Four story broke in 1989, right until 2010, the Innocence Project in Bristol done a research. There was 85,000 successful appeals between that time. Not only three police officers has ever been brought to book for all those miscarriages. A lot of them were mundane cases; they wasn't so high profile, but nevertheless, according to the law, there were miscarriages of justices. And yet, in Wales, there's not been one police officer, not one. That is shocking. And I mean, you've got to look at the bigger picture here as well. It's not just the police who've caused the wrongful conviction. You've got to look at the way the Crown prosecution have behaved, because they're supposed to be independent of the police, and we've already seen they're not independent of the police. And the solicitors and the barristers. How can you miss 115 breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, Chris? One might be a mistake. Two or three might be, or you might be get familiarizing yourself with the law. 115, that's a blatant and flagrant abuse of power. There's no other word for that.
Yeah.
Three solicitors, three junior counsels, three QCs, and the judge ignored all that.
Yeah.
These cases, the definition of a miscarriage of justice is mistake. In my case, it wasn't a mistake. I'll talk about this a bit more later. In Lucy's case, it wasn't a mistake. They wanted an scapegoat. And when they got their beady eyes on somebody and they focus on you, the wheels have just moved so fast. The next thing you know, you're tried, you're convicted, you're in jail, and you're like, whoa, what happened there?
Mm.
And it happened. And there's never been no accountability. And until we get accountability, unfortunately, there's always going to be miscarriages of justice because they know they can get away with it. So that's why the accountability issue for me is a big, it's got to be done. We've got to start jailing these police officers who lie. We've got to start jailing anyone who causes a miscarriage of justice and commits perjury should go to prison automatically. No ifs, no buts. They should be put in prison. And that's what I feel. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I have tried to focus on covering the police a bit more than others perhaps have in Lucy's case because I don't they can't just be allowed to weasel their way out of this without any responsibility. I don't say that they lied, and I'm sure they acted in good faith, but they ran an investigation that was abysmal, and they're responsible for what has occurred, and they should be held responsible. So I do try and talk about that whenever I can. Um, let's talk about the criminal justice system. So obviously your view of the criminal justice, like you're an incredibly informed person on this now, not only because you've been through it yourself, but also because you've done a lot of research and you know a lot about miscarriage of justice, and you've spoken to some of these people yourself and so on. So how do you feel about the criminal justice system as it stands today?
Well, I think miscarriages of justice are still going on. I think is they're getting more cleverer on how they cause these miscarriages of justices. Uh, in particular, crimes that never happened. I mean, Lucy's case. I know other cases. Nick. I'm just trying to think of this guy's name I was in prison with. I'll call him Nick. Um, he was wrongly convicted, and that no crime happened. And this happens quite a lot now, where there's no crimes at all. In Lucy's case, we know no crimes have been committed. but yet it's caused a miscarriage of justice. It's a different kind of miscarriage of justice going back to the 80s. In the 80s and the 90s, it was like confessions. You know, they were verbal admissions by the police. We haven't got that in Lucy's case as such, bar from one piece of evidence, which we'll speak about with Gisley Johnson later. I mean, on the whole, these people have manipulated data, manipulated evidence, which has got Lucy wrongly convicted. And the way they have done it is horrifying, because they can do that to Lucy. Who's going to be the next nurse? Because I know other nurses who've been wrongly convicted as well. Colin Norris, I believe he's been wrongly convicted. There's, I'm just trying to think now, Ben Geen comes to mind as another case which I'm very concerned about. There's a number of cases, you know. It's just Lucy's happens to be the biggest case, I would say. But how many more are there waiting to happen? That's the scary bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is another important reason to challenge this, is that this investigation, if it's not overturned, can then be used as a template for other investigations. And there's already this nurse in Birmingham that's been arrested, and they haven't charged her yet, but they've had her for 3 years, and they're not. They say she remains under investigation. So I think that's all very worrying. Um, let's talk about the potential for reform in the criminal justice system. Now, we both agree there's a lot of room for improvement. So, what do you think are the most important issues, and what would you like to see change?
Well, I think there's got to be an independent, you know, the police are not independent. You know what I mean? The CPS are not independent. I think we need two separate bodies. The CPS are too close to the police. The police are too close to the CPS. I think we need an independent body to evaluate what is evidence and what is not evidence. Because if we don't have something like the French system, you know, you've got a magistrate which goes out and investigates the cases to see if the evidence is there or not. They don't favour the police, they don't favour the prosecution, and I'm just wondering whether that is one avenue we want to go down, like the French, you know, their system, where the magistrate goes out and does the investigating, and if they think that the evidence is not strong enough, then it doesn't go no further. Now, I think if we had that over here, where the police can be lent on, or the CPS can be lent on, I think it'd be highly unlikely that somebody like a magistrate or a judge would be lent on to that extent. I don't know. You know, I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's got to be something different. The system needs to change. 100% it needs to change. And I think we need a body to look at what is evidence. I mean, the evidence was convicted Lucy. You wouldn't convict a cat on that, and excuse the expression, but you wouldn't convict a cat. You know, if the jury probably were bamboozled by all the legal jargon and everything. But take away all, you know, where is the evidence? Where is evidence that Lucy did this? There isn't any. It's all hypothetical, maybes, if and buts. Well, that's not good enough. You know, you can't convict somebody on with no evidence. Now, nobody's seen Lucy messing around with the incubators. Nobody's seen Lucy do this or do that. It was just these experts, oh, well, I think, I believe.
Yeah.
Not evidence. You know, and this is where it's got to change. They've got to have solid evidence before they should be allowed to take a case. I think the threshold is too low on the evidential thing where people can get wrongly convicted. I think it should be a lot more higher, especially in cases like Lucy's case and Ben Geen's and all the nurses who've been wrongly convicted as well. And in general terms, I think the whole we need a Royal Commission to look at everything again, like they did in the Birmingham 6 case. I think we need something as that magnitude to make recommendations on what changes need to be brought in and what needs to go out the window. You know,
Yeah, sorry, you just froze for a second there. Yeah.
oh,
Don't worry, it's fine. It just went quiet for a second. It's no problem. Yeah, so let me tell you something about something I read the other day. Okay. So I was listening to the song Runaway Train by Soul Asylum. And you may not know this, but in the video for Runaway Train, they feature a load of kids that were lost at the time, that were missing. And actually, a lot of those children were found, but some of them went through awful circumstances. Some of them have been killed. And I read about this one case that I think is featured or was related to that video in some way. And what happened was the guy's 4-year-old's daughter, I believe it was son or daughter, I can't recall which, disappeared and was never found ever again. Um, and there was some sort of initially looked like he was innocent. There were some vague reports that there'd been gunfire, a gun had been fired. You know, it's America. Um, And they, I don't know if they had, I don't know if they had evidence of his cat having died, but they prosecutors claimed that he had fired his gun and it had either, killed the cat, and it had either gone through the cat or ricocheted off the cat somehow, presumably gone through the cat, and then it inadvertently killed his son, you know, and then he just hidden the body and said, "Oh, where's my son gone?" Um, but the thing is, there was absolutely no evidence for this. I mean, they never found the body. They never found a bullet. I presume that the cat had been harmed. I presume they had that. But they know, the thing is, he could be guilty of this. Theoretically, what they're saying is true. Theoretically, he might have shot his cat accidentally, and then it accidentally went through his son, and then he buried. But there was no evidence to support that whatsoever. So he came out of prison saying, "I'm innocent. I want to find my son." Unfortunately, they never did. Very likely his son was dead, of course. And yeah, they got a conviction on it, and it's just a complete. In a way, that's even a more bizarre hypothesis than Lucy's case because there's just no evidential support for it whatsoever. So I find it incredible that you can put. I mean, this wasn't technically a murder; it was a manslaughter, but it's still a very serious charge, of course. And I just find it extraordinary that someone could just say, "Oh yeah, well, probably what happened is this, and probably what happened is that," with no evidence at all, and then you go to prison. I just can't believe it.
well, I got to be honest with you. When I first come out, I was told by the system and people in authority that these things doesn't don't happen anymore, and this has changed and that has changed. And I can honestly say to you, I was lied to because we've got so many cases. I've got a number of cases. I mean, in Scotland, there's the Luke Mitchell case. Um, that's a big case. I believe that he didn't do it. There was DNA which points to somebody else, and they won't test the DNA. It wasn't Luke's. They know that it wasn't Luke's. So you got to ask the question, like the $1 million question. Well, whose was it? Why won't they test it? Why don't they want to find the real person? I mean, so I've got cases like that. I mean, obviously Lucy's is the biggest case this country has ever seen, in my opinion. The biggest miscarriage of justice I have ever seen. I thought the Birmingham Six was big, the Guildford Four was big, but this is on a different scale, to anything I've ever come across. And I can remember when I first read about the case and I thought there's something not right here, but I didn't know what it was at the time, till started things unraveling. Then it's like, wow, how did this happen? So if these things are happening now, what's it going to be like in 10 years' time? How
Mm.
many? This is why we need accountability. This is why we've got to get Lucy's case back to the Court of Appeal. I believe it will go there because there's so much new evidence which hasn't been placed before the judge, the jury, which would change the picture of what actually happened, which was nothing. She didn't do nothing. So therefore, the conviction is unsafe and unsound and has to be overturned, in my opinion. And I feel very strongly. I don't know whether you know, I've been doing a little tour around Wales with my story. It's called Wrongfully Accused. And I've got some of the cases, and I've got Lucy's case on there. And what I think about Lucy's case, biggest miscarriage, biggest miscarriage of justice this country has ever seen for many, many years, in my opinion. There is no evidence. I mean, Dr. Chu and all the other experts, I mean, their evidence is so powerful. If the jury would have heard that, I do believe that Lucy would have been acquitted.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have got off the ground, to be honest with you.
No.
I mean, I know one of the prosecution witnesses. He lives in Wales. He doesn't live a million miles away from me, to be honest with you. And he's been seriously discredited. Well, all of them have been seriously discredited. The two or three of them who've said things, you know. But one in particular, that Dowie Evans, we already know about him from another case where he had a judge warned that his evidence was not reliable and not neutral. The jury didn't get to hear this. The jury should have got to know all this. It's called evidence of similar fact. And the reason I know that, because it's my case. You know, when I took the South Wales Police to court, I used a case called evidence of similar fact, where this police officer made up all these confessions in these different cases, and they said I could use that to discredit the witness. Well, this is what has got to be done in Lucy's case, because there's bound to be other cases where other judges have been warned. We need to find it, and then you can say, well, that's evidence of similar fact. He's done this before, you know, and then you can discredit him that way. But the biggest piece for me, the Gisley Johnson, we spoke about him earlier on, and I know for a fact he has just come out and said about Lucy's case, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He said about the confession, the so-called confession, which never was. I mean, if that man comes out and says that was not a confession, the Court of Appeal normally listen to him.
Yeah.
Because he's the leading expert on stuff like this. And he played a significant part in our appeal. Wonderful man, honest man. You know, if he thought for 1 minute that that was a proper confession, he would have come out and gone against Lucy. But he knows the truth, the same as we all do. That piece of evidence should never, ever have gone to the jury. Never have been used, let alone, you know, gone to a jury. And the way it's been misinterpreted, I've never come across anything like it. You know, so I'm pleased all these people are coming out and supporting Lucy, because, you know, I've managed to change a lot of people's minds in Wales, because a lot of people who thought Lucy was guilty. I'll be quite frank for you, Chris. And one of my friends to me, oh, Lucy Letby's guilty, Mike. And I went, I think you want to watch this TV program. I think you want to look at this. And when I showed it to them, they were so shocked and horrified. They're now supporting Lucy. You know, so this is where I can make a difference, because people will listen to me, because I know I've been wrongly convicted, and this is the power of being in the position I'm at, where I can say to people, just look at the evidence. Never mind, don't read what the papers say, don't read what this one has said, just look at the evidence. And when you look at the evidence, come back and then tell me that you think she's guilty. And I've had at least 4 people come back and say, oh, Mike, I'm so sorry.
Well, that,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a bit. The tide is turning. There's a song by, funnily enough, this song come out when I was wrongfully imprisoned in 1988 by Roger Waters. The tide is turning, and I always said the tide would turn one day for me. Well, the tide is certainly turning for Lucy. You know, everybody I know, when I talk about miscarriages of cases, what's happening with Lucy's case, Mike? What's going on? You know, everybody I know believes in Lucy. The support she has in Wales is massive. I don't know about England. I know she's got a big following in England, but the tide is turning, and this miscarriages of justice will get overturned eventually. My only concern is because the CCRC are very slow, they take their time. We could be looking at another 2 to 3 years, to be honest with you, Chris. That's the only drawback I can see here. I think we'll get the appeal, but unfortunately, Lucy might have to do a little bit longer before they dot the I's and dot the T's with all the amount of evidence, which there is new evidence, you know. I think we've got to be realistic there, you
Yeah,
know.
just have to wait and see, won't we? I don't think anyone, even Mark McDonald doesn't know. We just have, I know there's been delays in the past. I know it can take a long time. We just have to wait and see, I guess. So you mentioned the expert panel. I just wanted to ask you if you watched the February press conference and how you felt when you saw that.
I felt very angry because when you watch something as powerful as that, and you listen to each and every person and what they've said, it's very damning indictment on how they wrongly convicted Lucy. They should never ever have convicted her. She should never have gone to trial. She should never have been investigated. She was a good nurse. And this is what has come out of all this. Not only was she a good nurse, she raised the alarm on numerous occasions when things were going wrong on the unit. They didn't say anything about that. You know what I mean? The prosecution didn't. You know, they sort of, oh, this big bad Olga. You know what I mean? She's done this and she's done that. When in fact, all she did, she reported stuff to her superiors as well. And one of the doctors who went against her, she actually got a ruling against him, I believe. That's what my understanding is. She got upheld. So therefore, they had an axe to grind with her. There was the axe to grind, see, Chris.
Mm,
There was the beef.
mm. Yeah.
So that's why I think they went for her. But, you know, what these experts have said is if they go to the Court of Appeal and they give their evidence, I am 100% sure that Lucy is going to get a name cleared. It's getting them up there and getting that evidence admitted and admissible. Because the Court of Appeal are very funny on if there was evidence available at the time of the trial. This is the only bugbear for me. Because it was available at the time of the trial, they might argue that she should have brought it up then. So there's a bit of, you know, manoeuvre in there. You know, the CCRC might look at it and say, well, it's completely fresh evidence because Lucy wouldn't have known about this.
Mm.
Not an expert. But I know the Court of Appeal are very, very funny on certain things. If things were available at the trial, which you later bring up for an appeal, they say, oh, no, you can't use it. I've seen cases like that. And that's the only flaw I can see. But I think overall, with all the evidence together, the new evidence, there has to be an appeal. It would be another miscarriage of justice on top of another miscarriage of justice if she wasn't granted an appeal, at the very, very least. You know, all this evidence has got to be heard.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important for us to, you spoke about supporting Wales, and obviously there's a lot of support in England. It's important for us to create as much public scrutiny and pressure as possible, because if you just have a quiet appeal, they will keep
Brush it,
keep in prison.
they'll brush it under the carpet. You know, they don't like the publicity. This is the thing. I mean, one of the experts, we don't hear much of him now. All of a sudden, he's gone off the radar a little bit. I'm not going to mention his name, but you know the one I'm on about. He was, first of all, he was the first one on the front page of the news and this, that, and the other. Now he's been exposed. He's gone back into his shell because he's been found out. And this is what is needed, you know, in these particular cases. I've actually wrote to Lucy. I don't know whether she got my letter, but I wrote to her saying, listen, I understand what you're going through. I've been there myself and I introduced myself to her. I'd like to think she got my letter and I hope it brought her some comfort because I did say to her, innocent people do get their names cleared. It is difficult. It's a fight. But look at me. I'm sitting here writing to you now and I'm free. This is going to be you. And I did write that letter to her because I felt it was important that she's got somebody who's been through what she's going through now, you know, and I do feel for Lucy. I feel for everybody involved. You know, the families of the children. I mean, they've been lied to. They haven't been told the truth, and I think that is wicked and despicable. But then that's the system for you. That's not Lucy's fault. You know, in any way, shape, or form. That's the system's fault for going with this narrative. You know, without any evidence. I mean, I'll do all I can to help Lucy. I mean, I've wrote a new book which is coming out next year called Life After Life, because that's what I got, a life sentence. So I thought life after life seems about right. And I've mentioned Lucy's case in there, and I've mentioned certain things which is wrong, and just to raise awareness more in Wales as well, because I think anyone involved in the miscarriage of justice world, you have to rally behind everybody. Lucy's case, whoever's case is in a, needs to be sorted. Colin Norris, they mustn't be forgotten, and they must be. We just got to keep chipping away at the system until something gives. And it is hard at times. It's not going to be a plain sailing. There's going to be some bumpy roads. But one thing I'm sure of is justice is coming for Lucy, and justice is coming for her mum and dad as well. She's going to get her daughter home. I really do believe that will happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. I wish I could have the crystal ball and I could, see, what the Court of Appeal were going to say. But let's get the appeal first. I think let's work towards the appeal, get the appeal, and then see where we go from there. But I think she's got a real possibility that she's going to get a conviction overturned. I really do believe that. Justice sometimes do prevail, Chris. It takes time though.
Yeah.
That's the only.
Yeah. I just got a few questions to ask you finally. I want to ask you about Lucy's conditions in prison. It may be very difficult for you to comment on this, but I've heard that she would be kept under a lot of surveillance, very much protected. So, do you agree with that? And do you think she's safe in prison?
Well, I think because of the conviction, she's always going to be vulnerable. There's always going to be somebody who wants to make a name for themselves. I mean, we've seen with recent cases where people have actually been guilty, famous people in prison, and they've been attacked and stuff. I mean, I know it's totally different with Lucy because she's innocent, but there's always that one person who might think otherwise, and she should be protected. She don't deserve anything to happen to her. They owe her that much. They really, really do. You know, I just hope, like when we all went into prison, we were all in danger. But I mean, because of the situation, because it's children, it's a motive, isn't it? People they don't think straight, and you might get the odd person who's, should we say, not a full shilling, and there's a few of them in prison. We know that, and that's all you need is one loose cannon to have a go at Lucy, and she could get hurt, and I don't want to see that. So yeah, the authorities do owe her a duty of care, and I'm hoping that will see her through and, until we can get the appeal and get things sorted for her, like all of us. The conditions in prison. You know, all I can say about the conditions in prison, if you're innocent, it doesn't matter what they do. They can leave your door open 24 hours a day. It's still a nightmare because you shouldn't be there.
Mm.
The issue for me. It doesn't matter how comfortable they might make you or try to fit in. Do you know what I mean? I never did fit in. I was rebellious. Lucy's probably, doing her best to keep her head above water. But I think that the message I would send to Lucy from this interview is don't ever give up. Whatever happens, remember, justice is coming. And my famous saying is this: a miscarriage of justice does not lie dead in the grave. It will rise up to haunt them all, and it will do in this case.
Yeah, that's
I
very,
believe that.
yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you'd written to Lucy, which I think is great, and I really hope she receives that. I just wanted you to reflect on, obviously, when you were incarcerated, did receiving letters help you, and do you think it will help Lucy?
Yes, the letters, I got letters from, in the end, I was getting letters from Australia, from France, from Spain, from Holland, all over the world I was getting letters from. And it gave me so much hope. It gave me so much, people I didn't even know were telling me about my case and what they were going to do and campaigning. The lift it gave me inspired me. It really did inspire me to write that extra letter to the journalist, to fight a little bit harder for the prisoners, to fight harder for my own case. It makes such a big difference, Chris. And I know if Lucy gets those letters, she's going to be sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm not on my own. And that's all we want to know, is that we're not on our own.
Yeah.
Yes, we be, but the public are on our side.
Mm.
And that is, Chris, I had people sending me in money from all over the place, and everything. I mean, people were just so good. I've never met half of these people, you know? I mean, the kindness, there are good people out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of good people who wrote to Lucy, wishing her well and wishing justice to be done. And I just hope each and every one of those letters, she reads them when she finds time and realise the most important thing is she's not on her own. She's got all of us, and we're a big group. There's a many of us, and we're fighting for her. That's the main thing she needs to know. And I think she knows that now. I really do believe she would know that by now.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
That is crucial for Lucy to know that she's got people like yourself, like me, like Mark, a barrister. I mean, a barrister has been brilliant. I got to be fair. I've never known a barrister do the work that what he's doing for Lucy is above and beyond. I've never seen a barrister do this, and that is a one in a million barrister. I got to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, so finally, the last couple of things I want to ask you about, you've talked about your writing a little bit in the books that you've had published. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I've wrote 8 books altogether, and I've wrote 9. 8 are published. I've published 2 myself, and I've published the rest with proper publishers. The Death of Justice is my autobiography. Tells the story of the person I was before I went into prison, my background. I come from a poor background and stuff, and right up to the trial, right up to when we got out, right up to the judicial inquiry. I've won 4 awards for my first 2 books. Prisons Exposed, I wrote about prisons, what actually goes on in prisons, because I was fed up a year in the brigade going, oh, they got it easy in prison, it's easy to, they got a life of luxury and this, that, and the other. So I thought, okay, I'll tell you what really goes on in prison. So I wrote Prisons Exposed, and I won 4 international Amazon awards for that, which I'm quite pleased about. I've never won anything in my life before, Chris. You know what I mean? I'm one of those. So, for me, who couldn't read or write when I'm in prison, winning awards, I mean, I'm just like, I still pinch myself every day because I can't believe it. It's happened. But the most important thing is for me is getting the message out there, not winning awards, getting the message out there, what prison is like, how a wrongful conviction happens, and what we need to do to stop it. And I wrote stuff on. I do a lot on Texas death row as well, Chris. You know what I mean? I do a lot. I do a lot of stuff on that because when I was in prison, I used to write to death row prisoners, and one of them was a guy called Brian Robertson. Sadly, they executed him in 2000, but I made a promise to him in a letter, and he made a promise to me that if whoever got out first, we would help the other. And I said I would fight against the death penalty, and he said he would fight against the British system, to stop miscarriages. Unfortunately, I was the one who got out. I kept my promise to him, and I wrote the book Killing Justice in the Lone Star State, where innocent people were executed, as well in Texas, where I wrote about them. I mean, the most famous one is just outside of Texas. There's a guy called George Stinney Jr. He was a 14-year-old boy who was executed in 1944. A black lad. He was supposed to have killed 2 white kids, and he didn't do it, and they executed him at 14 years of age. I mean, that's another issue for me about bringing the death penalty back. A lot of people are calling for it, and I'm against it. For obvious reasons. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here. The Birmingham Six wouldn't be sitting here, and many others wouldn't be sitting here. So when you look at it from that point of view, um,
Well, I think once Lucy's case is overturned, the idea of the death penalty will be untenable because
no,
he would be facing the death penalty, obviously.
yeah, absolutely. Colin Norris would be facing it. There'd be others who would be facing it. Ben Geen would have been facing the death penalty. There's just so many people who would have been executed, and there has been people executed. I mean, we got Timothy, our own Timothy Evans, who was executed in 1950s. We've got uh, George Kelly, who was executed, 50 years ago. There's been many wrongful convictions come to light of people who've been executed when the death penalty was in. It has no place in a civilized, so-called civilized society, in my view, and that's why I wrote the book on Texas, because of Brian Robinson, because I knew whether somebody's innocent or guilty. To me, we got no right to start killing people and playing God and going, right then, well, he's poor, we'll kill him. Or his mother's a multimillionaire. Yeah, come here, love. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? Yeah, all right, your son will do a life sentence, but we're not going to kill him. You can't pick and choose, Chris, just because of wealth or whether somebody's poor. And that's what it's like in America. That's what it's like in it, O.J. Simpson, I rest my case.
Mm.
You know what I mean? If he would have been poor, he would have been on death row.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
So so that's where all my books have come from. That people have inspired me to write them and my experiences. The latest one I've got out is the dossier, which is the one I was saying about the 15 cases and everything of miscarriages of justice is in there. It's got my case in there as well, because I got new evidence in there of the overheard cell confession. I've got a leading expert from Liverpool University called Professor Michael Hoey, and he done a report on Stuart Lewis's alleged confession between me and Ellis Sherwood, and he said it was a total fabrication. So I put that new evidence in my book because that wasn't available when the Death of Justice come out. So I've put the whole transcript in there, and you can see how Stuart Lewis made up these confessions. And it was to put pressure on the authorities in Wales to charge this police officer, and still they refused to do anything about it.
Mm.
That's where I am with my books at the moment, and obviously the Life After Life is the newest book. It's not published yet, but I'm hoping to get it published in the new year. In the meantime, the campaigning still goes on. I mean, the fight for Lucy and all the other miscarriages I'm involved with will still go on. Uh, there's no let up. At the end of the day, every day is crucial. Time is of the essence, and I just hope the CCRC will look at Lucy's case as soon as possible, really, because she's 35, I believe.
Yeah. 35.
I don't. She should be having her own family now. Do you know what I mean? Like I should have been having kids at my, at 19. I should have had my own family and this, that, and the other. And having more kids or working and doing things with my life. Lucy's missing out on all this, and she's a woman as well. She might want to have children, and I just worry that because of the length of time it takes and the damage the miscarriage of justice is doing to her, how is she going to reintegrate back into society when she gets her name cleared? So that's another big issue.
Mm.
It'll be easy, Chris. I tell you now, it's not easy. It's bad enough for a bloke. You know what I mean? We always got this thing of, oh, we got to stiff up a lip and we got to do this and we mustn't cry and all that kind of thing. So we've all got that in us, built in us. That's what my father brought up in me anyway. And we sort of carry ourselves different to what a woman would carry herself. I mean, she's more vulnerable in the situation she's in, and I just want to see her. I just want to see this case sent back to the Court of Appeal without any delays. I really do, because that's what it deserves. She deserves to have her name cleared, and the truth needs. There should be a full, proper inquiry when she gets her name cleared into why this was allowed to happen. That's another thing we need to fight for when she gets her name cleared, because we do need to stop this from happening again. Because unfortunately, unless lessons are going to be learned, and my experience is I haven't seen no lessons learned on miscarriages of justices, it'll happen again and again and again. You know. So let's see what the new year brings. Let's hope we get some positive news on Lucy's case, and all we can do is sit back and wait and see what the Criminal Cases Review Commission are going to do, because that's where it's at. There's not a lot people can do other than keep it in the public eye. I'm sure you're going to be involved in that, the same as what I am. We're going to make sure it's out there, and Lucy's not forgotten. I think that's what we got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a really nice note to finish things on. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story today. I know it's going to be a really powerful thing for people to listen to. And thanks for everything you've done since you came out and your work. And I know you do stuff with the Innocence Project as well. I'm really grateful for that. And well, I'm sure we'll do some stuff together in the future as well.
Well,
Um,
anything I can do, Chris, you only got to give me a call or a message. At the end of the day, I've been doing this since I had my wrongful conviction in '87. It's like 39 years now I've been involved in miscarriages through my own um, case and many others. And it's my life and it's what I do. I hate injustice, and if I can play just a small part in helping Lucy, and we all chip in and do our bit, it makes a big puzzle then, doesn't it? You know what I mean? It's complete. We're all singing from the same hymn book. I think we're going to smash down that wall one day, and when that wall comes crashing down, the system's not going to know what's hit them with Lucy's case, because as I said earlier, this is the biggest miscarriage of justice case in the United Kingdom, no doubt about it in my mind.
yeah,
I've worked high profile ones, you know.
yeah, I agree with you completely. Yeah, thanks again so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you again soon, no doubt.
Yeah, no worries at all, Chris. I got to pick up my son now anyway. Like I got to pick him up. Oh, so it's just good timing. So that's brilliant.
That's good. That's good. I'll let you go and do that then. Thanks again.
Take care now.
Cheers. Bye now.
Okay, bye now. Bye.